I already made a video once on Persona 5 Royal for my channel, but this one I actually wasn't expecting to play, but I got it as a birthday gift, so whatever. But I'm glad I got it, because this was I think it was a good continuation to the base Persona 5. It basically like continues, it was like a year later or something, I think, something like that. And you come back to visit all your old pals, and they're like, hey, let's go on a road trip. And you're like, all right, cool. So you guys rent an RV or whatever. And then you just go on a trip with your pals, with your buddies. And then, of course, because it's a Persona game, metaverse shenanigans ensue. Only this time it's not turn-based. It's a character action game. It's, do the combos and stuff like that. Although there's still a lot of the RPG elements to it, like you still have a lot of your spells. There's a lot similar, but also quite a bit different. And I think some of the bits that bleed over hurt the experience a little bit. But overall, I would say the combat feels very good. The combos that your party can do are pretty good. They're great. They feel flashy. No, they don't feel as powerful as I would have expected them to, but they're fun. The game's fun. I can say that much. And the story, it feels like a sequel. This time, instead of, what was it before, palaces, it's jails this time, and the jails aren't the same. You still have kind of like palace rulers or whatever, but jail rulers or whatever this time. Monarchs, that's what they're called in this one. I don't remember what they were called in the first one, but yeah, it feels like a sequel. You get to run around, of course. So the overall layout of the jails is quite different from how the palaces worked. They're less enclosed, more just wide open. It makes exploration a little bit. It makes exploration really different, but I don't know. It works. I do have a few gripes about how the game plays. There's a lot that was in Persona 5 base that is just gone, because it's how can you account for that? You can't upgrade your guns. You just have, you sort of can, but you can't buy new guns. They're not like a separate item set. You still have your protectors and your weapons and your, what's that called? Accessories. But yeah, it's like they cut down on a few things that would make more sense for an RPG or a turn-based RPG, but don't make so much sense in an action game. But then they still have a few of those elements, those turn-based elements, that it's weird. So it took a lot of getting used to, and I still don't think I fully got used to it. But, enemies still have weaknesses. You can still exploit those weaknesses and get your all-in attacks. Although they're harder to get off, because just because you down an enemy with their weakness does not mean you'll get a chance to all-out attack. But, sometimes if you get them with a technical, or if you hit them with a certain move, sometimes if you're hitting them with a weakness, you'll get a chance to do a one more. And that'll let you dash in and get some extra combos in. But as I said, you don't feel quite as powerful. So, you're not just mowing through enemies, you're still having to be really careful so that you don't get hit. Which, in these types of games would normally be fine, but not if you have hordes and hordes of enemies. It's like you have as many enemies as you'd have in a Dynasty Warriors type game, but it's a character action game like Bayonetta or Devil May Cry. And it's with Bayonetta and Devil May Cry, how they usually fix it, they don't always, but how they usually fix it is they have fewer enemies at a time, and you do more damage generally. Or there's big powerful moves that can knock people off you. Bayonetta has her Wicked Weaves, and that helps knock enemies away. Devil May Cry, your moves just generally are more powerful, I think. But you also have bigger weapons that can have more stagger. Strikers just doesn't have any of that. It's your moves do some damage, but they don't have as just regular moves don't have as much stagger, and it kind of makes it difficult to get combos off sometimes. At least later in the game. Early in the game, it's usually not a problem. Like, you can just mow through enemies all fine, but at some instances, it's like, okay, I'd like to feel a little more powerful so that I can actually feel like I'm doing something instead of having to play it super duper 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 safe. Because, when you're in a character action game, you want to get those combos. You don't want to have to play too careful, because then that's not as flashy, it's not as fun, it's not as exciting. So it was definitely not optimized, and I'd like to see them do it again but better. Maybe in like a future installment, if they've got a Persona 6 in the works, maybe they can do a Persona 6 sequel where they do something like this. But I don't know, it was good, but it was not optimal. And then, some of the bosses, not all of them, some of them just felt like huge damage sponges, and I didn't feel like I was doing a whole lot of damage. SP runs out very, very fast. So there are luckily some combos that you can do that will, activate your elemental moves, which is very helpful. But I ended up kind of just spamming those because that's the fastest way to wear down enemy shields and then get your all-in attacks or what have you. Luckily, there are also Showtime moves which do a lot of damage until you get to certain bosses, and then the damage they do is kind of minuscule actually, and that was pretty disappointing because these are supposed to be big flashy moves doing a ton of damage. And granted, when you're in a horde of enemies, they're fine. They usually one-shot most enemies, but against a boss, it's like nothing. It's, oh, here's a small chunk of health. Have fun. And it's like, okay, that should have done a little bit more, at least double what it actually did, but okay. And then there were some like secret bosses later in the game that were even bigger damage sponges, took no damage, and could one-shot my entire party. And this was, like, I looked up guides online, and I was at or above recommended levels, and I was still getting one-shot. My entire party just dies for no reason, and even if I try to dodge, I can't dodge everything. And some of them spawn extra enemies, and I think more so the fact that I do no damage and they're big damage sponges, so the fights take like 30 minutes each, is like, okay, this went from a challenge boss to this is just annoying and I'm not going to do this. So it was a little frustrating, especially because you need to do those if you want to get certain personas. And why? Like, why? I don't want to have to go and grind. I just want to play the game. But, maybe that's just me. This time around, you get, instead of your confidants, you get bond skills, where, you're bonding with your friends and you're going out and doing activities, and you'll gain bond points, and you can spend those on tons of upgrades. It felt like those went way too slow comparative to what the game throws at you. I felt like there should have been, I feel like the bond point should have gone up a lot faster. I mean, there is something where you can upgrade how fast your bond skills level up, but I feel like even with that, it didn't go fast enough. And I maybe finished off 5 skills, and that's about it, and you got like 30 of these things. So it's just, I don't know, that felt like it went a little too slow. You couldn't max them all out realistically. I mean, you can do missions, and I think sometimes that upgrades those, but there's a lot of them that are they just feel like a hassle. And the rewards you get otherwise are just not super worth it. Items in this were super weird because past a certain point, certain items are just useless because it's like, oh, restore at 10 HP, but I've got like over 200 HP. So it's like, it barely does anything unless I buy just a ton of them. Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of gameplay problems I had with this, and it felt too much like there was a lot of reliance on the old turn-based mechanics, and they were trying to fit too much of that in, and the game couldn't breathe on its own. So I don't know. Maybe that's just me, but honestly, I mean, it kind of made me want to replay Persona 5 Royal, because even though I shouldn't, because I've got other games. Even my wife was like, what are you going to do now? And I was like, I kind of want to replay Persona 5. And she's like, you have other games. And I'm like, I know, I have a problem. Don't judge me. But yeah, I just the gameplay wise, it had a lot of positives, but I found myself focusing a lot on the negatives just because of how many problems I had. Again, not to say I didn't enjoy the game, just a lot of those like minor details just kind of added up to kind of a mediocre experience. As for the story is fantastic. It's exactly what you'd expect from a Persona sequel. You know, they keep plenty of the mystery. The characters interact really well together. There's a few new characters. You even get a new party member, and that's I know you get 2 new party members now that I think about it. And that's really exciting because they feel unique and exciting on their own. Although one of them I found I wasn't using a whole lot because they don't have any elemental damage. They have powerful physical attacks. They have like a gun attack, and then they have an almighty attack. And it's like, okay, so I can't use any weaknesses. And I found a lot of my party members really underleveled because I'd focus on weaknesses through every dungeon, and then that would mean a lot of my party members just kind of got shafted every time, and that's a little disappointing. I mean, I want to use all my party members, but it felt like I used them in certain situations, and then they didn't really get used much outside of that. So, I don't know. But there was a thing at the end where your entire party gets to do stuff. Like they split off, and then you get to play 3 different rounds of a boss fight in addition to the original boss fight. And honestly, the final boss fight was really cool. There were a couple boss fights I hated. I absolutely hated. The first boss was 1 because it felt like a huge damage sponge. After that, several of the bosses were fine for some reason. Then it was, what was it? It was like the third or fourth boss. Whatever the ice level was, that boss was a nightmare because in addition to being pretty difficult on its own, there's a segment where it slows down your movements, which means if you're trying to get off your elemental attacks with your combos instead of with your just casting, it doesn't work so well because you're going so slow and the boss is still moving at normal speed. And that was a whole gimmick I didn't like and felt was kind of arbitrary. But yeah, I mean, honestly, the story was the most exciting part because the story was engaging and I liked it. And, you know, you get more character moments that maybe you didn't get as much of in the first game. And characters that, you know, weren't in the game as much in the original. They get some more time to breathe, they get some more time to interact, and you get to see the whole group interact a little more, and it's really nice. So, I mean, I'm kind of upset that I didn't like it as much, but I still had a good time. Still glad I played it. You know, maybe I just suck. Maybe I just wasn't good at the game. Maybe I wasn't optimizing properly. But I feel like if that were the case, if you have to optimize that much to play through a game and do well, and if you don't, you like fall super far behind and end up having to slog through these damage sponges, I feel like that's not good optimization. Like I feel like that's a game problem rather than a I didn't optimize properly problem. Like if I can at least get through, even if it's a little bit of a struggle, sure. But if it's like I'm doing like nothing to these and then every fight's taking 30 minutes or more, especially if I die, then maybe that's a problem. So yeah, good idea. Not super great in practice. I don't know. But I would like to see another one of these in the future. Just optimize a little bit better. And then one more thing that I did kind of miss that wasn't in this one, but was in Persona 5 base game, was there's less to do outside of like fighting, but then they give you all these different areas. Like they give you a bunch of areas, but then they don't give you much to do outside of battles. And that was a little odd. And yeah, I know the story itself is engaging and there's lots of good character moments, and there's some scripted stuff that happens, but it felt like they were trying to merge the two types of games and it wasn't really working the best. Whereas I think they should have just, stuck with a new gameplay style and optimized that instead of trying to merge the two so much. So yeah, anyway, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed. Press all the buttons and I hope you have a great day.